The question I put out to my community is, what do people consider the best and most newbie-friendly build in Rogue Trader? Now, this is obviously going to change to people, and what answers you'll get will not most likely be whatever people did on their first run. If you'd asked me about thinking about it, I probably would have said something like a Warrior Pyromancer, because that was my first run, so that will always be the one to me that I learned the game with, so that will, to me, will be the best and easiest. Some people have said stuff like a Santic Officer, some other people said stuff like Commissar Officer. Some people have said everything from a Shotgun Burst build to even Warrior Vanguard. Now, what people think is going to be the best is also going to depend on the sort of playstyles I like. Some people will actually suggest some very advanced playstyles like Blade Dancer, which is something that I feel like is not the best class to learn the game with because, well, I should say archetype. It very specifically breaks the rules and the mechanics of the game, so learning to use that on your first one will actually be very counterproductive. With that in mind, with the 1.5 changes, I actually think one of the best playstyles for an entirely new player to Rogue Trader to start with is Warrior Navy Officer. Now, Warrior Navy Officer can be min-maxed in a variety of ways, but is also the only origin that allows you to go for the iconic gun and melee build. Now, what Navy Officer does is with fleet combat training, whenever you do a critical of your melee, you'll get an offhand hit. Yes, this will be more beneficial with having 2 melee because your tier 1 determines the strength of whether you're melee or ranged, and there's no tier 1 that allows you to do both. However, some of the warrior talents will apply to the early foe hammers, so the area stuff like crowd kill and easy target will apply to foe hammers. So in the early game, you can actually very effectively on lower difficulties be able to do a main hand melee critical, and then it will automatically go for an offhand shotgun shot from the foe hammer, and you'll do fairly good damage. With Malpain Shroud, you can stack temporary HP with Invigorating Resolve, and you'll actually still do some incredibly obscene damage. And as you get into Act 4, you'll be able to pick up an item called the Arc Militant's Cape, and then you can swap to a burst-only weapon, which will allow you to crazy stack your strength damage and do some extra obscene damage. This will mean that you have constant upgrades going from double melee in the prologue, or even a shield, to being able to use in Act 1 a melee and a shotgun offhand, and then eventually by Act 4 going into a burst only offhand if you really want to, or you can still stick to the 2 melee. It's all really up to you. But it's a constantly decent playstyle that will progress with you throughout the game. Will have constant upgrades, you'll have incredibly high armor, to the point you can actually outdo in defenses armor to what your enemies can do. So for this build, unless the enemy has 20% armor pen, they actually can't hurt me, and this is without buffs. And as I, do attacks and get buffs, my armor will only go up with subskin armor and dependable. So for this build, I'm going to recommend a Forge World Warrior Navy Officer using subskin armor, and I'll talk about some of the important talents and sort of the progression throughout the game. For the exact specifics of what stats to increase to take at the character creation, do look at the spreadsheet that will be linked in the description below. This will also suggest some gear to look out for on your run, as well as having a full explanation of every talent in the game and every ability in the game. But as you level through, some of the important things you're going to want to pick up is going to be like Thick Skin, because it will increase your early deflection and give you extra parry based on your armor, so it means that you'll survive very well in melee. Stuff like Hardened Scars, which is what you have in Endure Up, you want to have this before level 8, so the enemies in the Rykad Starpot, especially on Unfair, won't completely take you out. You can go for either Sworn Enemy or Taunting Scream, depends what you want to do, but having enemies attack you so you can parry and counterattack is going to be very strong. The premier feature of this setup is going to be Fleet Combat Training. When the Navy Officer scores a critical hit or successfully parries an attack with their primary melee weapon, they immediately make an attack whichever costs the least AP with their secondary weapon against the same enemy. If your weapon only has area attacks or only burst, you will do that. You can also, like I said, you can have a second melee, but people do like that iconic playstyle of having a melee and a gun, which whilst Rogue Trader does not support that in your tier 1s, there is a tier 2 that does enable it, so you won't just immediately drop off in Act 2. Another talent that's going to be useful to get, Crowd Kill, will apply to your not only your area attacks but also your area on the foe hammers, so those shotguns. Daring Breach 2 is going to be a fantastic upgrade, so you can use stuff like Impetus and Toughness. Reckless Strike with the upgrade Reckless Fury can guarantee those crits early on, and by mid-game you should always be critting. And stuff like Steel of the Forge will help you when you're wearing heavy armor to give you extra MP deflection, and you can't fall prone, so not falling prone is going to be quite useful, and you can use that with heavy armor proficiency. Now, I believe Kick will still knock you prone from Aurora, so unfortunately this is not a counter for that. When you get into the tier 2, your versatility will automatically increase with every critical, because you're going to do a melee attack and then immediately do an offhand area attack or even burst fire attack. Because that is a different attack type, that will increase your versatility. In order to do this, if you were to use to melee, you'd obviously have to do an area attack, and then the offhand single attack would build that up. Wildfire will increase your attack economy, so you want to get that early along with Always Ready. But one of the first talents you're going to want to get, especially by rank 6, is going to be Broad Expertise. So when entering combat, the Arc Militant gains 10 weapon skill and 20 ballistic skill until the end of combat. So your weapon skill and ballistic skill enhance each other, and every time you build versatility, you get +3 to both. I like to go in for Reckless Rush because, well, unlimited movement is great, as well as getting melee weapon specialist. So if you're using axes, you can make offhand attacks for cheaper, though you probably won't need to with this app, you're always offhand attacking. But when you're not in Finest Hour, being able to then take a 1 AP attack from the offhand is going to be quite useful. Dependable is going to be great for increasing your armor. You're eventually going to want to get that dual weapon combat to up your attack economy. Other talents coming in like All Out, so like I said, you can keep movement, build into your toughness so you can keep surviving, get flash fire to lower the cost of wildfire, and then you'll get other upgrades like Get Off Me, which are going to be very useful. And then your main draws here are going to be adaptability and critical versatility, which is going to increase your crit chance and your critical damage. We build heavily into perception so your guns don't miss, because they don't get the agility bonus to lower enemies dodge. And your weapon specialist, like I said, this is so if you smack someone with the hammer, you'll actually offhand attack them with the faux hammer, so it's kind of like a boom pull. And it will also allow you to then do 1 AP offhand attacks with the faux hammer itself. So you'll increase your attack on it and you'll keep you going. When we get into Exemplar around Act 3, one of the things that you are going to get fairly early is power arm efficiency, mostly just because of the aesthetics, not because it's better. Some of the Corral's heavy armor can give you like over 20 deflection, which is pretty good, but the heavier power armors and stuff like that will also both benefit from Steel of the Forge, and it just looks really nice, and that's why people want to get into that. You can also pick up Arms Master, so killing a enemy with a melee attack makes all the Arc Militant's range attacks this turn cost 1 AP, minimum 1, and vice versa, does not stack. This means you'll be able to do 1 AP area attacks or 1 AP burst fire attacks, so that's going to be very useful. You'll start picking up stuff like Easy Target, and then you'll go on and finish the build. One of the most important ones you can get here is to grade defense. That means that as you do damage, you will keep increasing your damage, and obviously Destroyer, because when you link that with Devastating Attack, it will allow you to do damage into the thousands. It will be the difference between doing a 200 damage hit and a 2k hit. For the other ones, I'm not going to read them all out individually, but you can look at the sheet, like I said below, to get a 1-for-1 guide to have on your second screen as you play through and level up. But Devastating Attack is something you could take earlier instead of Kick, because being able to use the rending, piercing, and impact damage to actually get those secondary conditions will enable some of the damage talents that we take later, such as Exploit Weakness and Contempt for the Weak and Preferred Target. So do have a read through to see how they all work, and this will kind of bring the build together of constant upgrades throughout. Like I said, early on you are going to focus on Malpain Shroud and using Invigorating Resolve to stack temp HP, and as you get into Act 4 and you get the Arc Militant's Cape, you're going to want to put a burst only pistol in that offhand, and you can use items to increase your rate of fire, so you get more crit damage to increase your strength damage on your melee. So at the moment we've got a mid-level encounter. So this is a level 24 of my Warrior Arc Militant Navy Officer. So I've gone into combat and you can see Broad Expertise coming in here to up my ballistic skill, as well as I've got fairly good weapon skill, and already my strength and toughness are doing just dandy. Now I've gone in for the makeshift heavy Xenomesh, which I'd got from the turret encounter, and I've already picked up the Invigorating Resolve and the Malpain Shroud. The objective that I've got in the mid-game at the moment is using Pneumo Boots, 1 AP charges, and using Epiphany to get refunds on those charges on kill. And if the enemy dies on the charge, I'll refund it, and then you'll still fire off the faux hammer in that general direction. Secondary, I've got my Thunder Hammer here, so we're going to go into this mid-level encounter, which is going to be against the Forge Fiend, which is one of those bosses people consider a little bit tougher. So we'll see what we'll be able to do here. So I'm going to set up my initial zones of control here, and potentially even set up that we can try to finish off some other enemies by moving through the encounter. It all depends what we can do here. This enemy is known to be quite strong, so I'm going to start with Cassia, throwing out some buffs here, and I can try to lower some of the enemy's defenses by stacking them up. Unfortunately, I forgot to position Pascal a little bit better, but that will just have to do. So, yep, we're able to stack up some of these enemies, and then I'm going to bring it down to my Navy Officer, who's obviously going to be able to use his Brace for Impact. For now, I'm going to set up Sworn Enemy onto the Forge Fiend, and then we're going to use one of these 0 AP charges to see what we can do here. So yep, we get the kill, and we managed to take a shotgun shot. Now Pascal gets absolutely BG'd because I accidentally left him there, so that's on me. But then I can charge this next enemy here. So yeah, we get a nice little charge and he gets knocked back. And we've still got our basic attack. So I'm going to try and get the Forge Fiend on myself. Realistically, I probably want to use Endure here. So I'm actually going to set myself up for that. So I'm going to use a stim. Going to activate my Endure so we can take a little bit of damage when we get for this. And I'm going to use a Reckless Strike to guarantee a crit. And we're going to hit the Forge Fiend. So yeah, fairly good damage. He even attacks us. We parry and we get an offhand attack. So we were able to, well, counteract him quite a few times. We've still got some AP here, so I'm going to reload, see if he attacks. He does not. I can use my Wildfire to make another attack. Not close enough to hit anything else. So yep, we go for an attack. We get a crit with shotgun. So he is deado. We've still got, because we haven't got melee weapon specialist, so we can't use that just yet. But I did set up for Cassia that I can move over to this enemy here. And I'm going to go for a offhand shotgun shot, which will knock it back. Won't kill him, but we've taken out the boss and done pretty well for this encounter. And there's only a little bit left, so we'll move Cassia in position. We'll try and stop this enemy from repairing. So Vox Skull's taken down. How we did not get enough to go for our Daring Breach there, or Finest Hour, don't know, but yep. So we are in a very good position here to just finish the encounter. So we can go in, charge this enemy, and we'll get a shotgun shot there. So yeah, that's passed us through on this encounter. So that's sort of how you'll play it in the mid-game, and you'll have very similar stuff going into it. As you can see, I was definitely using some of that gear very effectively, so that's like stuff you're going to want to look out for. If you want to read any of these talents, like I said, do check the spreadsheet below, and I also have a full loot table. I hope you've enjoyed this build. If you do, make sure to like the video, because obviously liking, subscribing, sharing, and all that sort of stuff helps in the algorithm, and I know to make more little guides like this for people in the future. Till next time, over and out, and I hope this helps you on your new journey as a new player.